The new development bank has taken a keen interest in the working stream discussions. The bank announced that it will open a regional office in Brazil next year, following the creation of the regional office in South Africa. A key discussion centered on local currency funding.
Many companies do not have the expertise, the know-how, the risk management in place to manage currency mismatches, for example. Right? So we want to ensure that we can, to the extent possible, provide local currency financing so that we can allow our clients to avoid that foreign exchange, foreign currency mismatch.
The biggest potential driver to employment is in the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing workstream, which includes the digital economy, recognized very early on that the big challenge is to find complementary projects.
A lot of work still to be done, to be frank with you, but I am and we are, as a working stream, starting to see for the first time tangible products being put on the table, and I'm confident that by the time we meet next year, which will be in Brazil, some of these would have been signed and we'll be in execution mode.
Part of that execution will include funding, and the new development bank has taken a very specific approach to funding projects.
It's important to look at these projects not as, just new development bank providing a loan to Transnet, but it has these massive multiplier benefits to the overall economy.
The closed door sessions are over. It's now a working document that is going to be presented to the leaders on Thursday, and we're hoping to see some major progress. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Durban, South Africa.
Well, let's get an update from the ground. Rama Nyang now joins us in Johannesburg. Rama, welcome to the show. Now, South Africa has been called a sort of role model for cooperation between China and other African countries. We suddenly hear President Xi will be holding bilateral talks with President Ramaphosa before the summit. Now, give us a sense of what to expect out of these new talks, especially against the backdrop of global trade tensions right now.
Indeed. So you really did hit the nail on the head there. That context is extremely important. Trade frictions rattling around the world. We'll get back to that in just a moment. But to go back to these two gentlemen, the precise agenda of the bilateral talks has not been released just yet. But we do know they will be focusing fairly strongly on trade and investment. South Africa's economic growth has been relatively sluggish, stuck in the 1% rut, if you will, for a couple of years now. And of course, with debt to GDP at around 53% by the end of last year, South Africa doesn't really have that much headroom, at least not on the public finances side, to borrow more growth, in order to borrow more debt in order to stimulate growth through direct investment in a range of things. So therefore, they have to plug that gap by essentially finding investment to actually flow in through the private sector. That definitely will be something of concern. There's also a recurring theme every time China and South African officials do meet: the need to rebalance trade flows between the two countries. At this particular point in time, we're looking at bilateral trade flows of just under $40 billion between these two countries, but it's heavily slanted in China's favor. Lots of raw materials coming out of South Africa, finished goods coming back from the other direction. Are we going to hear something to try and rebalance that? Perhaps we might get that out of the meeting between these two gentlemen tomorrow morning. But of course, it comes right back to that main issue that you mentioned, Uche, the trade war that's essentially on the horizon because of how closely linked these two economies are. South Africa is China's biggest trading partner on the continent. If there is a slowdown in the Chinese economy as a result of the tariffs that have been imposed by the United States, you can definitely expect some negative ricochets to essentially hit the South African economy, given the amount of exports that do go off in the opposite direction. So we'll be looking for those two key issues: trade, investments, and of course the trade war and the response to that as well from tomorrow's meeting.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, Rama, of course, you're in Johannesburg for the BRICS Summit. It's about to kick off in a couple of days. Lots of other African countries there looking to have some sort of dialogue with China and the other BRICS members as well. What do you expect coming in the next coming days? What countries are we going to see coming in, other countries from Africa? Give us a small update.
Indeed. So with regard to the countries that are coming in, what South Africa did in this particular instance, and you'll actually see this on Friday, is they introduced and took essentially with the theme of BRICS plus. So yes, these 5 countries together in this little bloc, but then you've got to figure out, especially since this is being held in Africa, what more can we do to expand trade relations, investment relations with the rest of the continent. To that end, you're going to see a lot of African leaders here. Angola's president will be in the country, Uganda's president, Namibia, Togo is also sending over the president, Mozambique as well. Paul Kagame, of course, will be here, Macky Sall, and of course, President Xi Jinping was just in those 2 countries a matter of days ago, as it were. They will all be here in various capacities, both as representatives of their countries, but also in Mr. Kagame's case, also because he's the chair of the African Union this year, he will also be speaking, as it were, for the rest of the continent. Now, for all the analysts we've been speaking to, one of the things they've been pointing out is, look, there's a lot of Chinese debt that's coming to the continent that's funded a lot of much needed infrastructure. It's not completely filled the gap, but it's been a useful option for a lot of African countries. But what they're pointing out to us is there might be a need at this particular forum to actually sit down and actually talk about, perhaps in some countries' cases, restructuring that debt. Will we actually see that coming through in the Johannesburg Declaration at the end of the summit? Will we see that happening in the talks? At this point, we're not sure, but it's something that both the business community and a lot of economists around the continent are concerned about. So lots of things to talk about on the sidelines between the BRICS, the African countries attending this, excluding South Africa, and of course, the Chinese president.
We're certainly looking forward to updates from you, Rama. Many thanks for that, for your insight. Of course, Ramanyang joining us there in Johannesburg.